Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for today's USDA fog abatement training. I'd like to welcome you all. This training today is brought to you by the Western States Alliance, which is a program of the Pacific Northwest Pollution Prevention Resource Center. Our name is commonly known as PPRC. This webinar is number 1 of Module 1, Building a Business Case for a Fog Program. My name's Krista, and I'm the Communications Manager for PPRC, and I'm going to be your moderator today. Before we begin, I'd like to give you some background about who we are. So we're a nonprofit based in Seattle, and we were founded in 1991 to provide pollution prevention information and technical assistance training to a variety of small businesses, local communities, and industrial facilities. These services come in the form of research, site assessments, face-to-face and virtual trainings, and general information dissemination. Our program hosting today's webinar, the Western States Alliance, otherwise known as WSA, is a membership organization of fog professionals, primarily from the Pacific Northwest. I can talk, I swear. From the Pacific Northwest, though we are recruiting all throughout the United States for our next USDA fiscal grant. So if you know someone literally anywhere in the United States, from Alaska to Florida, and even potentially the U.S. territories of Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands, please let us know. Some of the services we provide includes webinars such as these, newsletters, information on effective and safe management, upcoming legislation, and newest technologies available. And also, we traditionally hold what's called our fog forum in the spring. Due to COVID, we had to postpone that. We're hoping to have it this spring as well, though we'll probably know more by December of this year. So as mentioned earlier, this is funded by a USDA grant of Rural Utility Services, and today we have 3 speakers conducting the training: Clayton Brown, WSA Program Manager, Ed Gilmore, WSA Technical Program Manager, and Ken Grimm, WSA Industrial Outreach Manager. So housekeeping notes. So I do need to review your guys' CEUs. I believe that what we applied for will be current, so each webinar should qualify you for 0.2 wastewater CEUs, and I will try to clarify this with Kim again. So if you attend all 8 sessions, that will qualify you for a total of 0.8. And in order to get these, you need to take the polls that are going to pop out throughout the duration of the webinar. If you find yourself unable to take the poll, just minimize the screen and you should be able to take it. And then finally, please do take that needs assessment survey I directed you all to on the page that you used to register for these webinars. And also please do take the survey that'll pop up at the end of the webinar. And then a final note, please do use the question box in the panel of GoToWebinar. We try to treat this as an in-person, similar to an in-person classroom session. So please do ask anything that comes to mind. We really do appreciate the questions, and it helps us kind of know how your state is doing, and it helps us develop training materials in the future to help you guys. So I think I covered everything. So I think we will get started, so you can take it away, Clayton.
Thanks, Krista. Hey, Ken, I got a question. Is the pre-treatment workshop information on the Western States Alliance website?
I'm not sure, but we can take care of that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not, but I can put that on Western States Alliance for sure.
You add a link, that'd be great. That's
Yep.
In November, we're doing a web-based, our typical in-person industrial pretreatment workshop scheduled for September this year was canceled because of COVID. So the crew got together and they put a very good web-based series together. It's going to follow a similar format to what we're doing here. And it starts in November, and Krista can get that information to you if you need it. Like Krista said, this training here is funded under a Department of Agriculture Technical Assistance Grant. It's a technical assistance and training grant for rural communities, and we've been very fortunate to take advantage of that grant funding to do training. This is the third year. We've got our fourth year started already since it's October, and we'll be doing training similar to this nationwide over the course of the next year. So pretty exciting. My name is Clayton Brown. Before I went to work for a sewer district, I had 10 years of experience in utility construction, putting in the sewer and water lines, streets, subdivisions, highways, roads. And I got really tired of working in the rain, which you do in the Northwest. So I went to work for a sewer district, Washington County, Oregon, Clean Water Services. We are a public utility, and we provide sanitary and surface water management for the urbanized area of Washington County, Oregon. It's a population, when I started, just over 300,000 people. 30 years later, when I retired, there was over 650,000 people in the county. We had 12 member cities and a large area of unincorporated urbanized county that we provided service to. So I was the source control manager. That was my job, which included industrial pretreatment, fog abatement, pollution prevention, and the industrial stormwater program for Washington County. So we did a lot of the regulatory work for the sewer district under our MPDS permit. Currently, I'm the program manager here at Western States Alliance, working for PPRC. I have a bachelor's of biology from Portland State University and a master's in business administration from George Fox University. And I'm a proud grandpa. The little girl having the milkshake is now a big sister, and her little brother joined our family in about 3 months ago. So we're pretty excited for that. What we're going to cover for this first section, this first 2-hour section, is establishing the need for a fog program. We're going to cover what kind of data that is ideal to collect. It takes a while, by the way, to put a good justification package together, but we want to go over that, give you some ideas on what data is really important to collect and how to collect it, how to estimate costs for both the operation and maintenance without a fog program, and the staff costs to run the fog program, as well as develop a program, the program elements and what the potential costs are. We'll talk a little bit about data acquisition and management and run a case study cost benefit analysis at the very end. Ken will cover that information. I do want to say thanks to the folks that helped us put this package together. People on the left either are presenters or have been presenters in the past, or help do peer review or provide information for the presentations. And then the associations on the right are the groups that provide the letters of support and grant match for the grant that we get. So we're really thankful for them. We're going to add some more regional associations through this next process that we're working through right now. I do need to preface our presentation today. Why are we talking about fat, oil, and grease? A lot of you already know why we're talking about it, but sometimes you have someone participating in the webinar that has been drawn into it and isn't real sure why are the public works guys worried about grease. Well, fat, oil, and grease, the fog, as we call it, is a term given to polar fats, oils, and grease, typically generated by food preparation. And sources for fog can be households like mine, residential sources, food service establishments like restaurants and grocery stores, coffee shops, and then the food manufacturing itself. Some of the big commercial folks like Kellogg's, Reese's, Campbell's, Frito-Lay, the big Kroger bakeries. Those kind of folks also need to be evaluated for fog for discharging and pretreatment for fog. Now, this polar fog that we're talking about is called hydrophobic. It doesn't like water. In fact, because of its low density, it floats on water. Typically comes from animal and vegetable sources. In the restaurant inspection industry, we tend to divide polar fog into two different categories. One we call brown grease. That's the fog that's mixed with other food waste solids, and it's typically the stuff caught in grease interceptors. And then there's yellow grease, such as spent fryer oil, which does have a recycle value because it can easily be converted into biodiesel and used commercially. Now, the fog that's discharged into the sanitary system, it can solidify inside sewer pipes. It can cause blockages. It can mix with, it can get caught up on roots or combine with non-woven fabric wipes to get flushed down the toilet and create all kinds of mischief in your collection system. Not only in the pipes, but in the pump stations, which Ed's going to talk about here in a bit. It is a material that can easily be removed at the production source, which is why we're talking about fog abatement today. If you remove it at the source, you keep it out of the public system, and it won't impact your collection and treatment plant if you can keep the excess fog out from going down the drain to begin with. When I first started doing fog abatement program development training, I would get questions from some of the small communities that we worked with, Ken and Ed and I, when we first started. We would get questions like, well, how do you write a proposal for your boss? How do you get the city engineer or the city manager interested in developing and implementing a fog program? What data do you need? A lot of times the need for a fog program is anecdotal. You got guys out in the collection system doing line maintenance, and they can tell you where the fog problems are, but it hasn't been documented. How do you quantify that? How can you quantify the damage that's caused by the fat, oil, and grease that gets into your collection and treatment system? How do you quantify the cost to treat fog at the treatment plant? So those are some of the pieces of information that we want to cover today. And so I'll get kicking off here. One of the first questions that everybody asks is, well, what data do I need if I'm putting this proposal together? But we'll cover that. How do I collect the data? Who should I have collect the data? Am I going to need an environmental lab that can analyze for polar fog? We'll talk a bit about that. One of the questions that I ask is, how are photographs and videos going to be stored and accessed? And are they important pieces of information that can be added to the business case and maybe potentially used in enforcement actions later? Yes, but you've got to have a good process a process in place to document and maintain that video and photographic evidence. Another question that I asked is, how do you store the data? Is it stored so that it can be easily accessed and analyzed? Because data analysis is a huge part of an efficient fog abatement program. So we'll talk about that. When I first started working at Clean Water Services, I actually worked in the field operations, the line maintenance department. And we knew from experience that to properly maintain our collection system, we needed to be able to go through and hydroclean every foot of pipe at least once every 3 years, unless it was a major trunk line. And then we would try and get those every 4 or every 5 years, depending on the slope of the line and the location or the size of it. So the typical sewer lines were cleaned once every 3 years. That was our maintenance cycle. In some communities, it's once every 4 years. It doesn't really matter what that cycle is. You just need to know what it is, because there's some calculations that are going to depend on that value. Do you have line segments that you clean more often than your routine maintenance frequency? In Washington County, when I first started, the field operations manager called those fog lines Friday specials, because he had his crew go out and clean them routinely before a weekend because he didn't want to have after hours call outs because of a plugged sewer line. So Friday specials, fog lines, red lines, hot lines. I've heard all of these terms used to describe these line segments that are impacted by fog that need to be cleaned routinely over and above your normal line maintenance frequency. So if you get a chance, you identify every one of those line segments that are cleaned more frequently than once every 3 or 5 years or 4 years. You calculate the lineal footage of each one of those lines, and then you estimate what it costs to clean each line per lineal foot. Now that lineal foot cleaning cost needs to include staff time, and you need to have fully loaded staff time. In other words, if you have 3 people go out there to clean that line, you need to calculate not only their hourly rate, but also the administrative overhead. For instance, what does it cost for the benefits, medical insurance, retirement, and the paid time off? So a person's hourly rate, it may be 30% more than that hourly rate or more, depending on the jurisdiction that you're working in. That cost, that real cost for each employee needs to be included in your estimate of what it costs to do this line maintenance. The other thing is equipment costs. Now, in my opinion, equipment costs should be calculated as though you were renting the equipment from a rental agency. If your municipality doesn't already have a process established for calculating these types of costs, in other words, some kind of a cost recovery process, then you can contact somebody that does equipment rental or does the line service itself, a company that comes in and will hydroclean lines and collect the solids and haul them away, and get them to explain to you how they bid jobs like this. Because I don't want you as a municipality to undervalue the service that you're providing for your community, especially when you're doing a cost benefit analysis that we'll get to here in a bit. Another area that needs to be considered when you're looking at your costs for this line maintenance, this excess line maintenance, is traffic control. Do you provide the staff to manage traffic control? If you do, what's the value? If you don't, get a hold of some company like right-of-way traffic control or Flagger Force or roadway construction services, and they can give you an idea of how they bid jobs like this or what it would cost if you were to hire them to come in and provide traffic control in your community. And you can include that cost in your estimate here of the status quo cost to maintain your lines without a fog program. Now, another thing is, once you've done your Friday special cleaning, what do you do with the grease that you've pulled out of the sewer line? You know, does it go to the solids drying bed? Is it mixed in with your municipal biosolids? Is it disposed of in a local landfill? In some communities, they actually flush it down the drain and send it to the wastewater plant. What does it cost for them to handle it? You need to factor in the cost for transport and disposal for the material that you pull out of the lines when you're cleaning these Friday specials. This is all part of this calculus that you're going to be doing for your line maintenance costs for excess fog. So I guess, are there any questions, Krista? Because if not, it's time for a polling slide.
Looks like there are no questions. Oh, sorry, there is one question.
Good.
Nick asks, it may be coming, but can you explain the difference between polar and non-polar? And while Clayton answers that, we are gonna have the poll up. So
Okay.
does your city or utility track all collection system cleaning costs? So go ahead, Clayton.
Okay, polar fog is has animal or vegetable origin. So not dead animals. Well, I shouldn't say it that way. Not petrified dead animals like dinosaurs. Okay, where we get oil. Non-polar fog is typically petroleum-based fat oil or fog fat, not fats, but oils or greases. So the material that's used for lubricating equipment or machinery, some are water soluble and some are non-water soluble, cutting oils, etc. So that's kind of the difference between polar and non-polar. I hope that helps. So the Jiffy Lube guys use non-polar oils, and when they're taking care of automobiles, and restaurants use polar when they're making food.
Awesome. Thanks, Clayton. So here's the results of the poll. So it seems pretty similar to this morning. Any comments, guys?
No, that's about right.
Okay. Let's get to the next poll. And Nick, if you have any follow-up questions to the content Clayton just provided, just let us know. So the question asks, how many food service establishments in your area have an interceptor protecting just the 3-compartment sink? Okay, almost everyone voted. So I am going to close it. Okay. Wow. Kind of similar to this morning, too.
Very similar.
All right. If there's no comments, you can take it away.
Alrighty then. Click, click. We talk about fog lines. Where are they? How often are they cleaned? And what are your equipment and staffing needs? This is for the fog lines that are cleaned on a routine basis, just to keep the fat, oil, and grease from causing either a sanitary sewer overflow or a blockage in the sewer. So what about emergency line cleaning? These are the calls that you get. It seems like they come at most inopportune times. They're at night, or they're on a weekend, or they're on a holiday. You get them because somebody's put something down the drain that backs sewage up either into somebody's basement or somebody's bathtub or out on the street. And they're just no fun. These are sanitary sewer overflows. And if they've been caused by fog, they need to be tracked. And you need to be able to calculate what the cost is for the maintenance on that line, or the process of cleaning that line, so that you can restore service to whoever's impacted by the blockage. I guess my question to the city folks here on this webinar are, do you have the ability to recover costs in your city or this type of work? If you don't, have you ever tried to calculate what the emergency response costs are? Now, if you haven't, you should factor in the call out costs for your equipment. Now, I know from personal experience, because of working with the gas company and some of the local public utilities here, what happens is a lot of private contractors, they charge customers for equipment based on shop to shop figures. That's what they call it. So from the time they get the call, they start the clock. And that clock runs on that equipment until the equipment is cleaned and returned to the shop and ready to go out on the next call. So it's not just the amount of time that equipment spends in the field. It includes the wait time to get the crew there, the travel time to the job, travel time back from the job, and the time to get the equipment cleaned up. So it can sometimes it's double or triple what the actual on-site time is, but that's what private contractors do. Now, they also charge, like the gas company will charge a half hour for if their staff spend 2 hours on a job, an emergency job, the staff get paid from the time that they're paged in the on-call staff until they get back to the shop. So that will almost always add a half hour of travel time for each staff person, and then to the point where they clock out from the shop. So this information needs to be included in the calculus that you do for cost recovery. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, you guys ask me questions right away. The other thing to remember on these emergency callouts is traffic control and fog disposal. Those also have to be factored into the cost recovery, especially if you're in a municipality where you're able to pass that emergency line cleaning cost back to the customer that caused it. So just be aware that you need to be competitive with the private folks in terms of how you calculate that, because I know I got a couple of buddies up in the Puget Sound area. Their city had such a low cost for doing these emergency cleanouts that food service establishments would use the city rather than the local any local company, because the city was half the cost of using a local company to come in and do the mop up, the cleanup. So you don't want to put your city staff in that position. I want to talk a little bit about mapping. A lot of large jurisdictions, they have the ability to map their conveyance system using graphic information systems, what we call GIS tools. Now this particular map, this is for the city of Hillsboro, Oregon. It shows fog lines. They're the ones that are circled and they're highlighted. These fog lines all have a food service establishment either connected to that line segment or they're within proximity of it. They're upstream of it at some point, typically not far. Now, this allowed the city of Hillsboro to get a really good handle on how many lineal feet of sewer they were cleaning more than their normal maintenance frequency should have required. For a lot of smaller municipalities, if you have a paper map, it can still be used to identify and catalog the fog lines. A lot of the small cities that I've worked with doing these trainings, they have public works staff. They know where the fog lines are based on their experience, and they can tell you how often they clean them. You just need to document that. That anecdotal information, it's incredibly valuable, but if it's just in somebody's head and it's not written down somewhere, it doesn't do you any good when you're trying to do these calculations or put together a justification package for the mayor or the city manager or the budget council for your city when you're trying to justify a fog program. So just keep that in mind. This is really important information, and if you can document it, it's got a lot of value. And we're going to talk a lot about documentation as we go through this training and the one in next week. So briefly, I've covered the needs for a fog program, and then what data that you need to justify putting a fog program together. I've talked at length about excess line maintenance costs and how you can calculate what those costs are, or what they could be if you had a private contractor come in and do the work. Now, Ed, I'm going to turn this over to him here in a moment, and he is going to just have so much fun talking about the wastewater treatment plant operational costs due to fog and what causes some of those excess operational costs, and then how do you deal with them. So I'm going to turn it over to Ed at this point. And I've got two screens. I got to find my mouse here.
All
there
right,
it is.
I'm waiting for
my
you.
mouse. There you go, Ed. I think I
On my
turned it
screen,
over to.
You see me there? All right. All right. Is everybody there?
We are here. Well, I'm here.
Okay. Do you look at me? Can you see my picture here?
Yeah.
All right, great.
Actually, it looks like a cup of coffee.
Hello, I know. Hello, everybody. Yes, Clayton did see a cup of coffee, and anytime he sees me in the morning, he will definitely see me with a cup of coffee. That's definitely a good way to start a day. And oh, by the way, just before I get started, I end up sending quite a few emails to the different cities there in Wyoming, and I got to see the various pictures of the numerous smaller communities, throughout Wyoming. Just want to say, you guys live in an absolutely beautiful state. That's just really, really nice to, very, very, very beautiful state. You guys are lucky. Yeah. Ed Gilmore here. I'm a little bit different than the rest of the guys here. I owned a restaurant for almost a dozen years, and it was pretty good experience. I made a darn good deli sandwich, and made some very good soup too. So I learned the value of naming things correctly. I remember one time I had a soup called pumpkin soup in the fall, and it hardly sold at all. And it was delicious soup, but no one really wanted it. So then next time I did it again, but this time I called it Golden Harvest, and people loved it. So it was a very good soup. Well, my soup years are over, and I went ahead and went back to school at Portland State University. I got my Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry. And consequently, soon after that, I ended up working for Clackamas County, and I was a source control specialist there. And part of my responsibilities was industrial pretreatment, pollution prevention, septic program, and the part that I probably thoroughly enjoyed was the fog. Ended up starting a fog program there, and that's how I got to meet Clayton and Ken. So it was a good experience. After I retired, and now I'm a presenter here for Western States Alliance, and having pretty good time too. All right, so much for the chit chat. Let's go ahead and move on down to first thing is talk about pump stations. Pump stations are wonderful interceptors. That's exactly what they are sometimes. Pump stations or lift stations too, can actually function as a grease interceptor. Oh, just as a side note, there's private lift stations out there, and those lift stations can be one of those hidden little problems too. So you think about it, when grease accumulates in those, and what do the operators do? They take a little bit of that orange degreaser, and they go ahead and they pour that in and stir it up a little bit, and all that suspended grease, turn on the pumps, and all that suspended grease goes to the municipality. I'm not saying that's what they all do, but I think as a municipality, you probably find it to your advantage to find out where those private lift stations are. But back to the municipality. For a common pump station, grease is a problem. And the thing is, as grease floats, which quite a bit here, as the picture shows here, that it definitely floats and it accumulates there on the walls. And what happens also, when this grease accumulates out like this, it ends up getting stuck. Sometimes on the alarm, gets accumulating up on the alarm, and sometimes it gets the alarm stuck in an up position and cause it to create a false alarm. And that's where the emergency call outs happen. And I don't know about you guys, but at 2 o'clock in the morning to go out to a lift station just to find out that all that was is grease accumulating on a float doesn't make me particularly happy. It's really kind of a waste of your time and a waste of the budget too, because that's overtime they shouldn't have to pay for because of grease. But okay, but from my experience as a fog inspector, I found out that restaurants with grease interceptors, they get that grease pumped out and it gets hauled away. But when that restaurant grease accumulates in a pump station, what happens now is it gets hosed down to knock it off the walls, puts it into smaller hunks, ends up just washing it down, and the pumps get turned on, and it just ends up going down the collection system and ending up at the treatment plant. And that's for the operator to clean it up. In a smaller system, sometimes that's going to be you. Excess pump station maintenance costs. Yes, that's exactly what it is. When the grease starts accumulating in the pump station, that is extra maintenance cost. But let's discuss it a little bit. As I said, pump stations make wonderful, big, fat grease interceptors, and they're bare to clean. The question is, how many pump stations do your city have? Yeah, here's a good example. It's a small town up in Northwest Washington, had a population of about 2,400 people. And in that, they had 4 pump stations, and surrounded by 75 FSEs. So when that community started evaluating the need for a fog program, the operations manager there, he went ahead and included the pump station maintenance costs in his calculations of a fog program. The reason he did that is because 2 of those pump stations got cleaned out every 2 weeks, and the other 2 he had to clean out every month. This is all because of fog. So what does it cost to clean out that pump station? Well, how much does it cost to clean out that pump station to get rid of the excess fog? You know, remember what Clayton said a little bit earlier about go ahead and find out, you know, what a private contractor would charge? Find out what that private contractor would charge to clean out that pump station. And also, you can also just find out what their hourly rate is, and then use that particular calculation for yourself. It tells you how expensive it is to clean fog out of a pump station, particularly when you think about that could be prevented. But here's something that a lot of times people don't think about is the pressure lines. And do you have pressure lines? You know, do those pressure lines have air relief valves? And what does it cost to clean those valves because of fog that gets impacted? You can always tell when fog is impacting a pump station or a pressure line because there's an increase in the pump cycles and no increase in flow. So if a pump station has an independent meter, electric meter, you can easily tell it then, just see if there's any excess additional electric use and not any additional the pump time. Also, this is another to think about. Does fog impact the air relief valves? You know, because what happens, you know, when that fog gets impacted in the air relief valves, it causes the air to get trapped, you know, into the high parts of the line. And so when the pumps turn on, the air is just, you know, the air is going to be compacted, and the air has to be compacted in order to move the water. Once again, this is decreasing the pumping efficiency. So, but also, I think sometimes when you fail to clean and maintain those impacted air relief valves, it could result in a pump station overflow. You know what's going to happen. All that sanitary sewage gets discharged to the environment. Now, let's see how happy everyone is. And speaking of being happy, Krista, we have a couple polling slides here.
All right, let's see if we have any questions. We do not. Okay, so we will go to the poll. How many pump stations in your area require extra cleaning compared to 5 years ago? Okay, almost everyone has voted. So I'm going to close it in a few seconds. Okay. Awesome.
That is very good. It was just, once again, I'm glad. I'm good for you guys. It looks like you really are taking care of it, because what you don't want to have is that 75 and 80% pump station increase.
Yeah.
Pump station
I am
cleaning.
concerned though about the 4% that voted 100%. I don't think we've seen that before.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you can maybe comment what you predict the problem is, or maybe it's just a staff issue, we'd love to hear from you. And of course, we can answer any questions you guys have, you know, with getting help. So let's go to the next poll. Does your city or utility track any of the any of the costs of dealing with fog at the treatment plant?
While they're filling out this poll, Krista, I just like to throw out that I'm actually surprised that it's not 100% for more folks. From the people that I'm talking to, like I mentioned in the earlier session, the amount of extra things being thrown away, particularly during COVID when people are flushing lots of sanitary wipes and disinfectant materials and things like that down the toilet as well. I'm surprised
Yeah.
there aren't more pump station problems and not less.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys if, for example, if it is indeed a COVID phenomenon, that is super important for us to know because we can relay all of that information to the USDA and in an anonymous fashion. So don't worry about, getting reported or anything. We keep everything confidential. And even if you want to use like a secret email, if you're super paranoid, we will still take any of your responses. All right, so let's share. That's pretty high.
Yeah.
Any comments? No?
Well, that's why Ed is talking about it right now. Yay. It's a perfect segue for you, Ed.
All
No,
right.
I had a cough there and I had to turn my mute off there. Sorry, folks.
Let's see. We got a comment from Jason, and he says we are seeing a lot of ragging problems at our lift stations.
A lot of what?
Ragging. That's what Ken was talking about.
Oh,
Before I left,
ragging. Okay.
before I left Clean Water Services, and this was before COVID, we had 2 small pump stations that were impacted by latex gloves, and we spent days going through these little shopping malls trying to find the source, and found out that many of the gloves were coming from a salon that did hair coloring. The staff didn't know they just threw them in a bucket and they flushed it down the toilet. And those rubber gloves really mess up pumps. Rags are another issue. Rags and grease don't go together at all well. And we've in Washington County, we saw a 4-fold increase in the number of quote flushable wipes unquote over a 2-year period. So they are a miserable mess to get out of your pumps and the screening equipment you have at your treatment plant. And they don't break down very well. So yes, they are a huge problem.
And are there any resources we can provide folks to distribute on that kind of stuff during this time?
There are. Western States Alliance has teamed up with a company out of Bend, Oregon that does public outreach. They're called Gold Street Design, and they provide a ton of information. Some of it is prepackaged. Anybody can use it. They also will do custom outreach for specific projects that a city has. They just spent a bunch of time down in the San Francisco Bay Area where they're doing food. They're doing a food recovery program where they bring waste food from restaurants and grocery stores that's shredded up, and they put it into their big anaerobic digesters for energy recovery. Gold Street Design. John Gross is the guy that runs the company, and he's participated with us on several presentations that we've done. So yes, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, NACWA, NACWA.org. Cynthia Finley is the pretreatment person for NACWA, and Frank Dick is one of he's their pretreatment committee chair this year, I think, out of Vancouver, Washington. NACWA and APWA have spent a ton of time working with the Nonwoven Fabric Association to try and get better labeling on wipes, and also to provide education material for municipalities. I hope that helps.
Hey, Clayton.
Yeah.
While I'm thinking about it, it's actually kind of funny that Ed and I were just talking, and I noticed that King County has come out with some handouts. There's 3 pages of them, 2 on each page, and so it's 6 different languages, and they're basically things not to flush, and grease is one of them. But there are all sorts of, wipes and other things they have on the list. And I will get together with you if you have time tomorrow and put some of these up on our resources page on the website for these folks, so they
That would
have
be,
a place to go get them.
I know
Awesome.
Clean Water Services had a couple of little videos that they used to have on their website too. And I think Naqua's thing is the toilet is not a trash can. So there's a lot of information out there. It's just somebody needs to go dig for it. If you want us to, we'll be glad to do that for you and put it on the Western States Alliance website, like Ken said.
Just to add one more thing to the wipes. Once again, when the wipes get into the collection system, that's just another surface area for the grease to accumulate on. And so the grease that's suspended in the solution there, it will come out of solution when it gets tied up with a rag. And once again, this is just another addition to grease accumulating in the collection system. And when these rags do get into the pump station and do the clogging there, it just makes it one big mess and greasy mess.
Great. And
The-
we did get it. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, moving on back to the percentages, what Clayton said earlier too, is the 75% of people here that said no or don't know on the survey question. That's one of the advantages, that one of the items that we'll be talking about is how you can and why you should track these costs. Go ahead, Carl.
Right. And just to comment, there's a follow-up with rags being a problem for many people. So it's definitely something we should get up on our website for
Okay.
All right, take it away, Ed.
All right. Coming on down to the next slide here. Excess treatment plant operational costs. Yes, fog definitely increases treatment plants operational costs. And fog itself, it really has no measurable 5-day CBOD. That's a carbonaceous biochemical oxygen demand. And that's as the fog separates from the water. But fog is not readily available for microbiological attack. So if you want a value to calculate the cost of fog for your treatment plant, it's best to go ahead and use an established COD value. That's chemical oxygen demand. WRF estimated that 1 pound of fog is equivalent to about a half a pound of COD. A New Zealand study, using bioadditives, determined that 1 pound of fog is equivalent to 0.6 pounds of COD. So what does it cost for your wastewater treatment plant to treat 1 pound of COD? Oh, by the way, if you're using BOD for your cost calculations, typically COD values run higher than BOD. COD measures all the organics that can be oxidized chemically, and BOD measures all the organics that can be oxidized biologically. So the purpose of this exercise, let's go ahead and estimate that 1 pound of fog is equivalent to 0.4 pounds of COD. For estimating the amount of fog entering the wastewater treatment plant, we'll be using several case studies from the Portland metro area. The metro area, the municipalities there and the sewer districts have been using a preferred pumper program since 2006. And this is where the pumpers report the amount of fog that was cleaned out of the grease interceptors at each service. These pump out reports would be sent to the municipality or to the district and reporting the pump out. Back in January of 2013, the Oregon Department of Consumer Business Building Codes Division changed the Oregon Plumbing Specialty Code, and that which it required all new FSCs to connect all their fixtures and drains in the kitchen and the food service area to a grease interceptor. it was really nice that many restaurants went ahead and completed the retrofits, and then they connected all their fixtures and drains to the interceptor. And then in tracking the fog that was removed before and after the retrofits, we found the following. That says, once again, there's these restaurants that went ahead on their own, and sometimes with the encouragement of the district, they went ahead and connected all their fixtures and drains to a grease interceptor. And on average, when they did that, on an average, this is I always find this amazing almost every time I read it, that with the FSCs that had all their fixtures and drains, except the bathrooms, of course, they connected, and to an appropriately sized grease interceptor, they captured 10 times the fog that was captured under the old code. That meant before they did the retrofit, and then after the retrofit, they were able to catch 10 times the amount of fog. It kind of gives you an idea how much fog is is being released by a restaurant that's not connected, that doesn't have all its fixtures connected to a grease interceptor. Here. Okay, these are the facts that we knew. We knew how many FSCs were in the service district. Also, with knowing the pump out pounds of each fog, knowing the pump out pounds of the fog from each FSC. We found this out from the pump out reports that were submitted by the pumpers. And also, we knew how many FSCs were in compliance with the new code. Just went ahead, and from that, we could estimate the pound load of fog entering the wastewater treatment plants. Also, we had a surcharge value of COD for industrial users, and then we used that value to calculate the cost to treat the excess fog loading being received by the treatment plant. For smaller communities, you may not have a surcharge, but you can just contact one of the larger cities near you and ask them what their surcharge rate is. But I know all of this, there was quite a bit of words here, quite a bit of stuff, and it seems rather complicated. But once you take it step by step and start putting numbers down, you will come up with a value. Once again, then you'll be able to see what fog is costing you, what it's costing the treatment plant to treat. Removing grease from the at the treatment plant and removing that grease from the primary, it really can. The high fog loading here can really increase the maintenance cost for the scum sweeps and for the pumps. That's a no duh. I mean, it's obviously it's going to cost more, but also the operator who has spent hours there cleaning the grease off the weirs. Once again, this is a cost that's being absorbed by the treatment plant to treat fog that could easily have been or should have been captured by at the FSC. We all love foaming at the aeration basin. I don't think so, but this is an eventuality of some treatment plants. Nocardioform, the nocardioform here is associated with the filaments that are known to cause foaming. These filaments may grow because of the high amounts of fog, that's fats, oils, and grease, that's in the wastewater system here. And then in the meantime, septicity here helps convert the fats, the oils, and the grease to an unsaturated forms, which are, once again, it's easier for these organisms to assimilate. These organisms are hydrophobic, and at high concentrations, they want to float to the surface. Nocardioforms use fats, oils, and grease to produce a low-density fatty cell, which also causes them to float. In aerobic conditions, they generate biosurfactants, which help them stay suspended at the surface of the wastewater system. This filamentation foaming is a major cause of problems in the wastewater treatment plants, and not just in your locale, but all over the world. Bottom line, fog can be one big headache, and particularly if it's happening to you and you're the one having to deal with the foam. There's a city just in the southwest of Portland called Wilsonville, and they were a smaller community. They had a private operator running the private contractor operating their treatment plant, but the city maintained the collection system. And the foaming became a big issue for here at their contract plant. And the plant turned around and notified the city that foaming was starting to be a bigger and bigger issue for them, and they're going to have to increase their costs to the city because of the foam. With that information, the city went ahead and started a fog program, and after about almost 3 years, they were able to get most of the restaurants connected to have some sort of a grease abatement device within the facility. After they were able to do this, what they were able to do is the foaming went away at the treatment plant. And here was a situation that was really quite obvious. They knew that there was going to be an extra charge because of the foam, and they knew what it was cost to run their fog program. And they were able to see the savings of having a fog program in this community. Tracking and accounting staff costs is a pain, but it does have a value. Once again, we talked about the pump stations, we talked about the collection system there with Clayton, we've also talked about the treatment plant, but all this here involves personnel. Personnel is part of the cost of a fog program. But once again, you need to track the time. And just from my experience, I know it can be kind of difficult to accurately track the time that you, the staff, or staff can spend dealing with fog issues. Sometimes jurisdictions actually have project codes or time card codes to track that time. But really, knowing how much time you spend really can be a great benefit for program managers and supervisors. And also, it could be a hassle, big burden for the employees to spend that extra time completing the time cards and tracking that fog. But knowing how much time you spend dealing with fog is an important fact to know. Sometimes in doing these, changing the accounting system can be difficult, because sometimes you have an accounting person or accounting department that doesn't really want to accommodate that. So what you can do is, you as an individual, you can, that little notebook that you keep in your top left-hand pocket there, just go ahead and note the times that you spend maybe cleaning the weirs or going to the pump station, or just dealing with grease there at the treatment plant or in the collection system. And once again, oh, by the way, if you're doing this, make sure that your supervisor or your manager knows about this, that you are tracking your time. And I think that, once again, this is just another way to document the actual cost of fog. But also, you think about how granular you really want to be. Is how much detail do you need to keep to justify a fog program? I don't know. It's just, this is part of that staff meeting where you find out what is the importance and the right balance between detail and generality. The important thing is that you end up coming up with a number, and with that number you can come up with a value. Krista, you're lucky again. I got a couple more polling slides from you. And if there's any questions, go ahead and pop them up.
Let's see if there's any. Nope. All right, let's get to the question. Are you comfortable in saying you know all of the food service establishments in your jurisdiction? Okay, almost everyone has voted, so I am going to close it. Very good.
That's very, very good. That's nice. And also, for that other 25% there, we'll talk about some ways that you can find out where all those restaurants are that are in your jurisdiction.
All right, let's get to the next poll. What do you feel is the level of management support for your fog program? Okay, almost everyone has voted. All right, I am gonna close it.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. I'm
that's
sorry, guys.
disappointing.
Yeah. I'm really sorry for that 41% there. Particularly the 30%. Maybe, what's good about, once again, about this webinar, besides getting CEUs for it, is that it can be part of a discussion at your staff meeting, and you throw out some interesting facts or things that you've learned or picked up, and be able to maybe encourage the need to support your community or your municipality in having a FOG program. And once again, it's kudos on the 33% there. That's really good. Thank you.
All right, doesn't look like we have any comments.
Okay.
Nope, so you can take it away.
All right. I didn't click it down there. It was a question slide. Now you see the polling slide. Whoops. Two good polling slides. Go. There we go on. First, we talked about how you can figure out what it's costing your district or your municipality to have a FOG the cost of FOG effect on your program. But also now we're going to talk about how you can estimate the cost of implementing a FOG program. And this is important. Figure out what it's costing you. Now, how much is it going to cost you to actually set up the program or have a program to address the FOG? Like most of the people here already, with the survey was done a little bit earlier, shows that most of you know where all your food service establishments are in your area. And you should be having a list or these are documented somewhere. And even those who don't know where they all are, you should have a list of which ones you do know about. And typically, your FSEs include, anywhere where food is prepared and served. Restaurants, coffee shops, yogurt, ice cream shops, schools and jails. And particularly jails are something that sometimes get ignored. And also, if you happen to have a prison in your municipality area too, that's another major producer of FOG. Hospitals, sometimes a big problem, sometimes not. Delis and grocery stores. Grocery stores are always a surprise. They can generate a lot more FOG than you would think that would be coming out of a grocery store. Retirement centers and care homes, don't ignore those. People eat there too. When I guess when you talk about the really small ones that have the less than 5 people, that's not that big of nothing. It's basically a residence, but we're talking about a facility or a large care facility. Company, cafeterias, and sometimes churches. And when churches are offering a food program, for their community there too, it does. There is a potential for FOG being a problem. So, for those of you who don't have a list, but you kind of know where they all are too, you can always, or if you have that list, it's still sometimes to turn around and ask the health department there to give you a list of all the facilities that have license for a food service establishment. What's good about that is that sometimes there may be something on that list that you weren't aware of. And if you didn't have a list, it's nice that the health department went ahead and produced one for you. But once you end up having that list and you go ahead and done a lot of you have already started, but those of you who haven't done it, this is to do that initial inspection. Probably the initial inspection that you do at the facility is probably, I would say by far, probably the most important one there is, in the sense that it's really the most thorough one that there is. And this is where you get all the information you need, or you should be able to get all the information you need. It's obvious the physical address, the name of the place, and what type of facility it is. And also you need to figure out, note in this that you documented is what's the FOG loading on this one? Is it a heavy FOG loading or very heavy, or is it just a medium, or just it could be a low producer of FOG? But the important thing is you get to know how much grease is coming out of this facility, and also list of all the fixtures and drains. And here, this is the best part, that when you find out which of those fixtures and drains are connected to a grease interceptor. And if you're really lucky, you find out that you can find out what kind of interceptor it is, the brand and the model, and this is the lucky part, if it's being maintained. And what is it? What is the pump out frequency on this particular interceptor? Knowing the size of the grease interceptor will give you so much information, particularly with the pump out frequency. Obviously, here you need to know who the property owner is and the contact information, and particularly sometimes it's often that the property owner isn't always the restaurant owner. But where this comes important is that if there's ever any issue with this particular facility, it really is the property owner who's responsible. And also who the owner of the restaurant is, their contact information, and obviously the manager, the on-site manager, their information. And here's something that gets overlooked a lot, and particularly when documenting, is know the connection point in the public sewer. Whether this particular restaurant, this particular facility is on a, as Clayton called it, the Friday night special line, or the hot line, or the red line, or the grease line. You know, if it's one of the restaurants that has on a heavy grease line, it's important to note that, because that's going to help you to help triage, which words we're going to be talking later on about solving any grease problems that you may be having. Staff costs. There's two different main areas here. There is when starting up your program, and then actually operating the program. And one is, you know, basically how many FSEs are in your service area. That kind of helps you a little bit, getting you an idea of how much labor or how much manpower you need. Okay, and also when you do that initial inspection, you know, that's going to take a lot more time. And how much can you do in a day? And also think about how many full-time employees you need to initiate the program. And also how many FTEs will you need to maintain the program. By the way, when I talk about an FTE, that's full-time equivalent. And it's anyone, you know, 40 hours is one FTE. So if you have someone that spends, you know, 20 hours a week on the FOG program, that's a half time, or 0.5 FTE. Once again, this helps you with knowing budget, allocating resources, and also for budgeting purposes also. And also to figure out how much it's going to cost you. Here's some good, you know, FOG program examples. You know, the city of Vancouver has approximately 800 FSEs, and with that, they have 2 full-time FOG inspectors, and also Washington County, which, you know, where Clayton used to work, is that they had over 2,400 FSEs, but here they had 1 full-time employee who was the utilities employee, and they have 5 part-time FOG inspectors. And these 5 part-time inspectors worked for the individual cities with part of the larger sewer district there. And here's a good example of a partial FTE who's helped running a FOG program in one of the smaller communities. Also, the city of Portland, they have, you know, over 4,000 restaurants. It's more than that now. And there they have 3 full-time people and one program manager. Yeah, Friday Harbor, you know, they have 75 FSCs there. And here's a case, once again, is the program was done, they had 1 part-time inspector, and he had other responsibilities, and sometimes FOG took a greater part of his time, and sometimes his other responsibilities took more time. But it's just a matter of just juggling those 2 responsibilities, or those multiple responsibilities together. The city of Wilsonville, we talked about that before. That was the city that had the foaming issue. You know, they've had, you know, now they have over 100 FSCs, But here it was the industrial pretreatment inspector had responsibilities for the fog program, but also he has responsibility for the IPT part of it, and also he was responsible for the fog program. It's similar to mine, you know. Once again, I was the FTE. I had industrial pretreatment responsibilities as well as fog. So part of my job was working with fog. The same thing in Wilsonville. What they were able to do is once they got that grease program up and going, they was able to do the work. But what also was helped them too, because it was a one-person shop there, he had his clerical help or clerical support that ended up helping him with his pump out reports. And here the question is, you know, what staffing level is appropriate, you know, and what level of staffing do you need? You know, based on our experience in the Portland area, you know, fog inspectors can complete 1 or 2 initial inspections per day. This is once again setting up a fog program or going out and doing that initial inspection. Or sometimes if you even have a fog program already, a new restaurant opens up and you do that initial inspection. It takes quite a bit of time. And also when you have a small shopping mall or a strip mall, which has multiple restaurants in them, ends up may end up taking you a couple of different days to do it thoroughly. And sometimes you're doing that initial inspection, an FSC may involve some dye testing. Once again, all your main reason for doing dye testing is to verify which units within the restaurant is connected to an interceptor, and also to identify which drains are bypassing the interceptor. But once again, once the fog program is up and going, then you have what we call the maintenance inspections. And this really does take much less time than that initial inspection. But for FSE, with all the fixtures and drains connected to an appropriately sized and well-maintained interceptor, they only have to look at that, you know, every once in a while. And sometimes all you have to do is go by and verify the maintenance schedule, and to go out there and pop the manhole there and look into their grease interceptor and see if you have any fog that's bypassing. And if everything is working, if everything looks good there, you're doing good. And it takes a lot less time and to come back and inspect that restaurant. All you're doing is maintaining it is operating in good condition. Once again, the proof, I guess there it is. Proof is always there at the interceptor. Once again, we do recommend, but we really do strongly recommend that the fog inspector periodically inspect the interceptor during a pump out. And so when you're there, you go ahead and you know, try to schedule your inspection at the same time the facility is being pumped out. And when you do that, it allows you to check out the condition of the interceptor and make sure it's still in good operating condition. You know, inspectors in Vancouver, Washington, they observe every single pump out, where the ones in Washington County, as we talked about earlier there, they try to do it at least once a year to be able to do an inspection. And once again, they try to coordinate this inspection with the pump out. And also pump out, what's nice about it is pump out inspections, you know, that they do encourage pumpers to really maintain the interceptors properly. You know, when the guy's pumping out an interceptor and somebody's there watching him do his job, it's amazing how good they are, how good they can be at that time. But also what it does is you end up developing a relationship with the pumper, and he truly is an integral part of your fog program. You know, just kind of a side note of a story here that there's in one of the communities there in the Portland area, they had a major chain restaurant with a well-operated facility, and when the facility was inspected, they had everything. It looked like a really, really well-run restaurant, and but he never did. He just did the initial inspection inside the restaurant, and the restaurant turned in his pump out reports on on a quarterly basis, and everything was doing fine. So finally, the inspector, on one of his other follow-up inspections, he decided to check out the interceptor and to see if it's being pumped out regularly, and just to confirm the pump out. And he went there and popped the manhole, and to his surprise, it was stuffed full of grease. I mean, it was just jam-packed. Here's a situation where the inspector never did look at the interceptor, never really supposedly observe any of the pump outs that were being done. And what was happening is the restaurant manager there was just falsifying reports. And the main reason he is falsifying the reports is to reduce his overall cost, which in my opinion is probably helping him get a little bit better commission on his wages. But that guy went bye-bye and had to go elsewhere to find a job. And there was a major fine against them, a penalty against this facility, against this restaurant. And as Clayton told me earlier, which I didn't remember this, it was one of the largest initial fines on a restaurant for failing to clean out a restaurant. Failing to clean out the interceptor. But once again, this not only cost them their penalty on this, it a considerable amount of money to get the thing pumped out correctly, and also then the damage that was done to the interceptor as a result of grease being impacted for several years. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and with that, I'm going to go ahead and just go down to the next page here and just kind of give you a brief review. And once again, the materials that we covered here is once establishing the need for a FOG program, the data that you need to collect. Talk about the excess line maintenance costs and the excess treatment plant costs, and as we said about the staff costs. And the best part here, what you're going to be talking about, is the program development cost and introduction to the cost benefit analysis. And the person who's going to do that is a guy, Ken Grimm, and he does a very nice job, So with that, I'm going to introduce to the famous Ken Grimm. Ken, you are on.
Thank you, sir. That was a famous without an IN in front of it, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ken. Sorry.
just checking. So good afternoon, everybody. You've made it through 2/3 of our program today, and I'll be the last portion and ramping it up for you. I spent about 12 years in industry prior to coming to PPRC as a variety of things, including a plant manager, an ISO auditor and document writer, managing the industrial use discharge permits and the process that required them. I also spent about 6 years as a compliance manager, wearing all sorts of compliance hats for a large metal fabricator. And from that, I came to PPRC to serve as the industry outreach manager and trainer. So a big part of my job is to help, find, develop, and promote and implement programs to help a variety of businesses reduce their environmental footprint and save money. And as the last 7 years, as part of that, I've been involved in FOG matters and doing the FOG program training for PPRC and the Western States Alliance under various USDA grants, such as the one that brought this training to you. So as we continue on with talking about planning, there's an old builder's adage that says, as a rule of thumb, about 90% of the work in building a house is in the planning. Getting the plans drawn up, getting the various assorted permits, ordering materials, hiring and scheduling contractors such that the project keeps humming along on schedule, et cetera, et cetera. And putting together a FOG program, particularly if you're starting pretty much from scratch, is going to be very similar to that. That is that, the largest portion of the effort is going to be in the planning and program development, and about 10% of it is going to be in the implementation of the program itself. So when we talk about taking time out to map what your FOG program outcomes should be, that's one of the really, really important aspects of the development of your FOG program. Identifying what objectives and measures are going to demonstrate that your program is successful. Clayton will tell you that when he first began working on that FOG program at Clean Water Services, they needed to improve the number of facilities that got inspected. And so he set that as an objective, the number of FSE inspections completed in a year. And they actually achieved that objective. They measured the number of inspections. They met their goals. But the real need was that the sewer district was trying to reduce the number of fog lines they had to maintain. And they didn't really see any decrease in the number of fog lines. So, it was an activity measure, and activity measures can provide some important information and have their place, but that's not really the metric that he wanted in order to prove that his FOG program was successful. And so one of the things that you'll need to spend a lot of time doing is identifying those metrics and then gathering that data, because that's going to be what informs you where you're successful, where you're not successful, and what steps need to be taken as you follow the business practice of time, plan, do, check, act. And we talk throughout these trainings about effort versus data as a driver for your program. And that example is just, one particular reason why. So any regulatory program has an orderly timeline for development and implementation. And the city, to start with, must have the legal authority to implement a regulatory program, and that's what a FOG program is. So once the legal authority is in place, program development can commence, and there's not much point in beginning your program until you have that. So you'll see the first sticky note on the board here is SUO, Sewer Use Ordinance. That's really where it all starts. And there are some resources for you to help you implement one or to help make it more robust. But that's what it starts with, is putting that legal authority into place, and then start identifying all the stakeholders, and then looking at all the moving parts of the program. And what you're seeing here pictured is a process map. These are used a lot in a variety of different trainings, including lean training. But it's a really, really excellent tool to help visualize the process at each step. And one of the things this enables you to do is to see, everyone can easily see the process. And so, using sticky notes like this, it's easy to, add or remove steps, or if the steps are out of place, to switch them around, that sort of thing. So everyone can see the process in the same way. That eliminates or decreases errors of procedure. It also can help build understanding between areas that are cross-functional. We had we got some feedback from one of the previous trainings that we did from a group of supervisors and a couple of administrative folks who sat in on the training, and they wanted to let us know how much they got out of it, because they had no idea until they watched that exactly how complex and how important and how valuable a FOG program is. And I think for those people, they're going to find that their management support is going to go up. But that's just an example of building some of that cross-functional understanding. And they can also enable the development of metrics. This will show you what data is critical to collect and capture, and or show you any gaps in data. And it can decrease the workload a bit by identifying any missing procedures or unnecessary steps, duplication of effort, et cetera, et cetera. So once you've put the legal authority into place and get everything lined up here, so you understand the processes involved, now you're going to be able to start identifying the stakeholders that are going to be involved as part of your planning process. So ideally, the stakeholder list is going to include the city staff, as well as outside stakeholders that will be impacted by the FOG program. That's going to include the food service establishment community. It may include the Chamber of Commerce. It'll include pumpers, plumbers, building and health department officials. And oftentimes, once the planning and public meeting process begins, other stakeholders are going to start expressing interest in getting involved as well. We have a polling slide up now again. This is next to the last poll.
Okay.
Take it away, Krista.
We did get a question. So, do you have an estimate as to how much time to expect to spend maintaining an existing FOG program based on the quantity of food service establishments?
Ooh.
And the poll is up while Ken answers.
So I don't know if Ed or Clayton want to weigh in. Off the top of my head, there's so many variables that I don't know. It's hard for me to give a really crystal clear answer. Do you guys want to add anything to that? I'm going to say no. I wish I had more for you than that, but yeah, it really is. It's dependent upon your relationship with the FSEs, where you are in the program, how much of and what kind of data you're collecting, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't, we like Ed talked about. There's, if you go back and look at those other programs, sometimes it seems like there's one inspector for every 100. Sometimes there's one inspector for every 300. It's just, it's so different in that regard to each area that I'm sorry, I can't give you a mathematically sound answer. Yes.
I'm sorry, I was unmuted here. I was muted, excuse me. Back to your question, the reason being, and you were right on, you can't give a specific answer. It really depends on your community and depends upon your management, and also how much time you got available to you. And it's really, and also how bad the fog is in your community. That's all those are just variables that are unknown until you start getting into it. So you gave a good answer, Ken.
Great. Thanks, guys. So let's get to the next poll. Does anyone have any responses to this question, or can I get to the next poll?
Once again, just if I was just looking at this, I knew nothing about the people at all, and seeing less than one, I would say this is we're smaller communities, and the people end up having other responsibilities other than fog, which is probably the most common fog programs. They have other responsibilities besides fog. And for the between 1 and 2, it's generally a larger community that can afford to allocate a full-time FTE to take care of the fog. So no, it's.
Thanks, Ed. All right. What types of data do you currently collect? And then someone did say they have problem with residential units, in particular those who tend to cook more ethnic types of foods.
And that particular situation is common with every single program that has apartment houses, or certain groups of people are congregated in a particular area. And sometimes it's just a plain individual who has very poor management of grease, cooking their bacon in the morning and pouring the grease down the drain. I mean, that's not unusual.
Yeah, and
But
I was
go ahead.
thinking maybe for people encountering that, it would be a good idea to connect with your public health folks, because they'll have people who can do outreach on behalf of you.
Generally, yes and no, but also that's something we address later on in one of the programs. We talk about other means of doing it, and that's Clayton was also talking about the getting information out, stuff available, and those are flyers that you can put into your
Yeah.
billing. Sometimes you can target them locally, and once again, the most common is when you'll find apartment complexes, and you'll end up talking to the manager and having the manager pass out brochures on managing grease.
And that has been very effective. But what we did find in Washington County is that it has to be done over and over and over.
And over.
Yeah, because a lot of apartment communities are kind of transient. People, they'll sell their house, they move into an apartment, they live there for a year, and then they move out, somebody else moves in. But we did develop a relationship with apartment management, the management associations and different management groups that commercially provide residential management. So rental agencies and property management companies. And they were willing to hand out information. They were willing to put door hangers on everybody's door in an apartment complex if we had grease problems downstream. But you've got to start. You start from scratch with that, and then you work your way up.
And just to your point also, Clayton, I know the folks at Idaho Falls, Idaho had expressed that a good portion of their fog problem was residential, and so every year in the billing before Thanksgiving, they put a flyer in about not pouring your turkey grease down the drain, et cetera, and they actually saw improvements in that for a 3-year stretch, and then said, okay, we're good now. And the 4th year they didn't do it, and their grease problem returned. So they've made that something that just annually goes out to remind folks not to do it.
Great. Thanks, you guys. All right. So it looks like most of these folks do little data or some data.
I think that's not unusual, particularly if Ed's correct that, and I take the same thing from that a lot of these are small communities that simply don't have the resources, or at this point haven't had the information they need to generate the resources to collect that data.
And Brian made an interesting comment that I missed. He says caterers are a significant contributor here. That's interesting.
Painters?
Caterers.
No,
Oh, caterers.
Catering
Yeah.
companies. In Washington County,
Yeah.
I don't know how it is in other counties, but in Washington County, any catering service had to have a commissary that they were based out of. And the commissaries were licensed by the health department. So mobile food vendors and catering companies supposedly have a commissary that they do food preparation in before they take it out to the venue that they're providing service for. Anyway, something to think about. We talk a little about mobile restaurants, I think on day 3 or day 4. I don't know if we've got that covered. We covered a little bit. I know we did last year, because it's kind of a new area that a lot of communities are starting to deal with food pods, where a developer will put in, like in an old parking lot or an old used car lot, they'll put in 5 or 6 mobile restaurants up on blocks with picnic tables and an awnings so that people can come in and eat. In my town, we have one of those right now. There's a couple more in the planning stages. The one that they installed, they actually put in a grease interceptor, a large grease interceptor, and all of the food pods connect their gray water lines into that interceptor. Then they also provide power and fresh water hookups for each one of them. So that may be one way to deal with those guys too. It's evolving.
But also, Clayton, I think what you talked about too is the caterers, and they have a commissary or the kitchen where they cook, where they end up producing the food in the first place. And they should be treated just like any other FSC. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Take it away, Ken.
All right. So we got about 23 minutes left. So we'll continue on with talk a little bit about program development costs. So one of the things that's really going to help, it'll help you justify your program development if you can demonstrate that you've got a plan in place for developing the program and can show the city management that you've given this process some serious thought and tried to address some of the questions ahead of time. And part of that is determining what staff's going to be involved in development. One of the districts had it says here division manager, program manager, communication specialist, and environmental specialist involved in program development for a year. And when Clean Water Services started developing their program, they included public works supervisors from the member cities, all the field operations supervisors, and a lot of other folks, but they didn't consider initially including public affairs folks until somebody expressed interest in being involved, and that public affairs staff person ended up becoming a very integral part of the team. They fill the role frequently of contacting stakeholders, scheduling meetings, finding venues, and then moderating those meetings, and even documenting the meetings and creating to-do lists and assigning them to team members, all by this person that initially wasn't considered as part of the program development. So you never know who's going to be interested and who's going to be of real value to your developing program until you start reaching out to involve folks. And smaller communities obviously may not have the luxury of having a public affairs person on staff, but you may have people in the community that maybe someone has experience managing public meetings or other things, and they may be willing to lend their expertise to the process. Sometimes someone from the Chamber of Commerce or the local Rotary may be a good partner in the endeavor, because they want to provide a service to their members, their business members, and as part of the process, they can help represent those folks and work to really make sure that this is something that works for everyone, and then they're a partner in helping to promote the development with the FSE community. So what sorts of data do you need? Well, for the FSE data, these are some of the things you're going to need. We have physical address. The reason we have physical address up there as a primary tag instead of name is that restaurants and eateries come and go. I saw a statistic, it's at least a decade old, and I doubt things have changed much, but 50% of all restaurants that open close within the first year. And of those that survive, 50% close within the second year. So physical address has much more staying power as a marker than a restaurant name. I mean, you'll need the name as well, but since the building has been constructed as a food service establishment in many cases, the address is the more permanent tag of an FSE than the name. Also, if FSE is built on leased property, tax lot information is really good. The tax map and tax lot number, that information can help the municipality find the actual owner of the land that the FSE is sitting on, because in many cases, they're actually going to be the ones responsible for controlling what's discharged from their property. So estimating the potential fog loading from the FSE, this data is really important because it's going to help you in the triage program efforts to deal with impacts to the fog lines. And there are tools and fog calculators available to assist you, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in each of the 3 sessions, including a look at the study on which most of this is based, as well as what that showed as a categorization of very high, medium, and low, because you'll need other things like interceptor maintenance history. If they're a self-cleaner, check their maintenance log. If they don't have one, then they need to be required to keep one. Can check the pumper invoices for past service dates on the interceptor and record those as part of the data you collect. You want to know what types of pretreatment they have. Can you identify the interceptor by make and model, or can you measure the dimensions of the interceptor and keep that data? Because as you look for the potential fog loading, that's going to tell you exactly what that interceptor is able to handle, and therefore how much grease is being, you measure how much grease is being captured. You now have an idea how much grease is not being captured and how much is being discharged to your collection system. And we go over this with some case studies on Wednesday. And so that'll be very good information for you, because I think you'll be really amazed at what the difference is, particularly when you go from a 3-compartment sink to all fixtures and drains. So for the utility, what data are you going to need? You're going to need to know which collection system line segments are impacted by fog. Calculate the lineal footage, identify the normal line cleaning frequency. Like Clayton said, 3 to 4 years is usually the normal frequency for in general, but fog line segments can be anywhere from 3 to 4 months instead of years. And so what is the frequency? How does that compare to normal? And what are the line cleaning costs, including the extra costs that Clayton identified, like disposal of fog and traffic control? Identify all the pump stations impacted. What's the cost for taking action to clean those and return them to efficient service? And then stakeholder involvement costs. Once you've identified all the stakeholders, you're going to need to identify at which step in the program development process you'll bring them into the discussion. And some of them are going to come right from the start, but there are going to be others that, for example, it may not be necessary to involve pumpers in the regulatory structure development process, and they may not want to be involved and likely find it uninteresting or unrelated to them off the bat. But it'll be important to bring them into the discussion when the fog program is being implemented, because they can be really significant partners for you in this whole process. So having a written plan of stakeholder involvement and a draft schedule, that's going to be an important piece of the presentation you make to the municipal decision makers. And I think we are now going to our last poll of the day. So one more time, yours, Krista.
Okay. How do you track fog program inspection and compliance? And let's check to see if there's been any comments. Nope. No comments. Okay. All right, I'm gonna close it. Wow, that's a lot by hand.
But also, I think this probably reflects the most of the people attending this webinar they run their fog program as it's just part of the responsibility. They have other responsibilities. So it's once again reflecting to a smaller program, and sometimes it's just as easy to use it by hand.
Great. Let's get to the next poll.
But just one, I think that's one of the things Ken's going to be talking about is understanding the value of having a little bit more sophisticated data system is best, primarily for analysis reasons. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
External data management systems are, please select one of the below, not all. Okay, I'm gonna close it pretty soon. Few more seconds, guys. All right, I'm gonna close it. All right.
Yeah.
I think we all agree that external data management systems can definitely be helpful, but we do know that there is a price point that may be limiting you folks from getting it. So we'll be talking about data in module 2, so stay tuned and hopefully we can get you guys started. Do we have any other comments?
No,
I guess
you said it. Go ahead. Go ahead.
one comment I'd make is in Washington County, we found out that it cost us more to work with an antiquated system than it did to go with a fog data management system. So a lot of times the question of expense, if you don't factor in the administrative cost to do data entry into a spreadsheet or paper tracking, or the lack of ability to do data analysis, or the amount of time it takes to pull information out of a table in a notebook and enter it into like Excel so that you can do some number crunching, the cost for not having a system is higher than the cost for having a good system. So just something to keep in mind. And we will talk a little more about that. Ken's going to talk a little bit about it today, and then we're going to talk a lot more about it next week.
All right. So we can start to get ready to wrap it up, Ken.
Okay, so I'm going to go through this pretty quick because I want to make sure we get to the numbers. But as Clayton said, he's going to look at at the external data management more thoroughly a week from Wednesday. But in the meantime, I'm going to touch on them right after we talk about how to present your business case. And one things you want to make sure you have when you do that is to have what they call we call them the status quo. We've also heard it called as the do nothing, or, we've always done it that way. Overhead, however you want to term it, the costs of not changing anything. So, every municipality and sewer district will have a little different cost objective and calculations. But you'll want to be armed with, what your expected cost to develop and implement a program is, as well as the cost to maintain that program, and have that as part of your presentation to municipal decision makers. Because the ultimate question is, does the cost for this FOG program outweigh the existing costs without a program, or does a more robust FOG program outweigh the existing costs of the FOG program as it currently is managed? So we're going to cover cost benefit analysis, like I said, a little more thoroughly in the next information, but we are going to touch on it here right after we get through to the data acquisition and management. And the particular thing we're going to look at is Swift Comply. It's not the only one out there, and there are other good ones, but it is one that, as the Western States Alliance, we have a relationship with. So municipal members receive a discount from Swift Comply if they sign up and use their system. And it's basically got 3 modules. The city module that contains all FSE site data, links with GIS mapping systems if you use those. It's got all of the historical information about compliance. The food service establishment module that allows FSEs to contact pumpers, to schedule interceptor service, to track the results and send reports to the city. The pumper module again allows pumpers to contact the FSE if it's time for a service and say, hey, we're coming next week. You're due. Any issues with that? Oh, great, come on in. We're good to go, et cetera, et cetera. But they can then report those same results to the FSE and the city. They can't see each other's. You can't see other FSE data. You can't see other pumper data or each other's customers. But it's typically charged on the number of FSEs in the municipality, and in some of the larger areas where there may be multiple cities and or multiple sewer districts operating different FOG programs, Swift Comply can provide a single reporting system. So pumpers that cross jurisdictional boundaries, the complexity of everything for them is reduced. The confusion in service and reporting is reduced. These are some of the screens that they report out. You can see one that lists the grease control devices. There's one for scheduling a pump out, one for the pumper to put information in if they, when they're doing an inspection, including any notes for any deficiencies in the interceptor. This is the establishment database. So you, as the FOG program manager, can look at this. You can see the name of the facility, the address, the service frequency, et cetera, et cetera. And on the left-hand side, you can see the red, yellow, green dots. The red is where service is sufficiently overdue that they're considered non-compliant. The yellow is where the service is overdue, but they're not considered non-compliant yet. And the green, it would be a facility that is in compliance. And the advantage of a system like this is, for you as an inspector, you can direct more of your time to the folks in the red and spend less time with the folks in the green that you can see are doing what's supposed to be doing, what they're supposed to be doing anyway. So, the most important question is, what is important to your city leaders? And that's what you need to answer, is that, excess costs for FOG maintenance, taking care of that, the small business reputation. One municipality, the city manager had no interest initially in a FOG program. He's sort of baked in the extra cost of FOG line maintenance into the operations budget, like most people have done for years and years and years. And his concern was, what will the staff do if they aren't cleaning fog lines, as if the people have nothing else that they to address their time with, and everything is caught up. In another municipality, the city leaders didn't want to, they were concerned about that second bullet point. They didn't want to upset the small business community. And as they got into the discussions with the food service establishments in the community, what surprisingly became clear to them was that, the FSE owners and operators wanted to do what was right. They just wanted they just wanted the rules to be clear, understandable, and they wanted a level playing field, so that they weren't, the regulation wasn't more onerous for one type of business than another. And they said, you tell us what to do, we'll do the right thing. That alleviated that decision maker's concerns, and they went on about implementing their program. So this is an example of the final business case presentation. On the left is the status quo. So this would be the information you would have. This is what it's costing you now. In this case, this is Washington County. They've got, at this time, they had 23 food service establishments. I think they're up about 300 or 400 from that now. But they're, the cost of cleaning was about $180,000 a year for pump stations, 45 air leaf valves, another 10. Cost them 22 grand a year to dispose of the fog, 35,000 for maintenance, and 2.8 million for wastewater treatment plant operations. And a lot of that was the chemistry and things that Ed talked about earlier. So they were spending annually a little over $3 million dealing with fog in their communities in Washington County. So to develop a program, and at the time that this data was collected, they did not have one. So developing a program cost about $120,000. It's about $375 to do those initial first inspections that are very, very thorough and very data intensive, et cetera, et cetera. About $90,000 for ongoing inspections, about $6,000 to be involved in plan review, and we'll talk about the importance of that on down the line as well. And then about $45,000 for data management. So the development costs were about $500,000, and the maintenance costs were $141,000. So after 5 years, those costs had been reduced 80%. After 5 years, they were spending $36,000 on line cleaning from 180, 9 from 45 on the pump stations, from 10 to 2 on the air relief valves. So you can see just about all of these, it's just about exactly 80% reduction. Wastewater treatment plant maintenance, again, 7 instead of 35, and $560,000 for wastewater treatment plant operation costs instead of $2.8 million. So after there's break even after year 3, and the first 5 years for the program development, you've got the $500,000 it costs to initially do it, and then the 141 annual maintenance. So after 5 years, it was costing them $1.2 million. After the estimated savings after 5 years was $2,473,600 a year. So the status quo was going to be $15,400,000 for 5 years. And you can see that's a drop of about $13 million over the course of that 5 years that Clean Water Services was not expending in order to deal with their fog program. Again, $13 million, and that's the kind of information you want to come armed with to your meeting to show what kind of savings can be anticipated with a more robust program. When it comes to inspections and initial inspections, these are the results that the city of Portland garnered over 5 years. You can see the red is the facilities, the number of food service establishments where they didn't know whether they had a grease removal device or not. The blue is where they knew they did not have a grease removal device, and the yellow were the establishments they knew had one. And you can see every year the FSE known to have a grease removal device goes up and up and up. And every year the unknowns go down and down and down until they were able to comfortably say they knew where all the FSEs in their area were, and they had contacted all of them. And that is, at 1%, that's a pretty statistically small number of facilities that they didn't know about. The blue, that you can see that goes up and up and up as they go through the process of discovery. And then as those people start coming into compliance, you can see from July of 2017 on, the number of facilities that did not have a grease removal device go down, and at the same time, the FSEs known to have a grease removal device go up, and that's simply in their case the number of establishments that installed something to bring themselves up to current minimal standard, if not fully up to code. So we want to thank you for attending. That's the end of our 2 hours. We have a course evaluation form that we would be very appreciative of you filling out. It provides really good information to us about what you liked, what could be done better, what was missing in this section, although that may be addressed in other sections as well, but it's still good information for us. And it's used that goes to the USDA, and they use that to decide whether or not to continue to support efforts of this nature. So the page we talked about with resources, we'll add some of those other resources for households up here, and I'll try and get that up before we meet again on Wednesday. But in the meantime, the 4 presentations are up here as PDFs, and there are additional resources that I'll let you check for yourselves, and we'll address again next Wednesday when we hopefully have a little more time. This is our contact information. Clayton, Ed, and I, we love questions. We'd be more than happy to answer yours. And if you have anything that's that requires a pretty significant amount of research, we'll either put it in the rapid response, or we'll send it back to you with a few notes on how best to enter it into that. And that's a service we provide that will allow us to dedicate between 4 and 8 hours of research to address your question and come up with some really strong answers. And then we post that on that site so that it's available for everybody to see. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much. Thanks for sticking with us the whole time, and I hope to see you Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, do you guys, the presenters, want to stay on the line for a bit?
Yes.
Not on this line. We can call into the other line that we traditionally use. I'm going to be posting this to YouTube.
Okay.
So would you guys like to do that?
Okay.
We'll call in a couple minutes.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Over?
Yep.
How'd it go?
I think they went well.
It's smooth.
Was it a double, a triple?